Okay, hello everyone, I'm Shogun. In the last lesson, we talked about RPC blueprints and C++. This stuff is a bit tricky, so you must practice writing and testing it more on your own. Then verify whether you can use this to create a backpack for a multiplayer online game. This backpack needs to support picking up, dropping, and adding, deleting, and modifying the container data within the backpack. It must support multiplayer networking, so you can be considered to have basically mastered the fundamentals of multiplayer games. Then let's add some final verification. Here, when we send an RPC, there is a verification function, so we can verify it in this place, and then check whether it has been dropped. Okay, so now we will combine this with property synchronization to explain it to you together. Here, we first need to create another actor class. We won't change this, because I think the last lesson was indeed a bit too complicated. Let me explain it this way. Because we are not simply sending RPCs. We nested RP inside RPC and even nested RPCs further. Right, but when you actually write the logic, it is like this. Because after the server processes it, you definitely need to return the result to the specified client. For all clients, including the server itself. And also update some logic. So there will be such a problem. And then we will create a new RPC actor. Okay, let's create an RPC actor. And then we do the same. We first simply copy the relevant things. That is, we need to copy these colleague files. Then enable the property replication function for it. Then, let's make it a bit simpler here. Let's write it simply. Don't make it too complicated. The previous part was really too complicated. Even I think so. Then, right here, we'll give it a mounting. For example, let's give it some money. This variable, can only be modified on the server. Right, let's set it to 100. Okay, then, after setting it to 100, this property, we definitely need to register it. Let's register it. Register here. Let's create its implementation. Then we just call it. After creating its implementation, let's replace this thing inside here. Okay, so now we have a morning. This morning, we better let it have a lot of permission. This way we can know what exactly is going on, who changed it. Then we call a we'll use this. Okay, we'll give it a function called money. This function, we'll put it below. It should be something we call over. We'll just use a simple one. Okay. Then we'll create the implementation for this. Good. After it's fully created, then we'll print something here. How do we print it? We'll also take the previous print and copy it over. Then we'll encapsulate a method here. We'll encapsulate a method called ShowMoney. That makes it easier for us to debug. Create a ShowMoney method. Then inside ShowMoney, we can just call ShowMoney directly. When we detect that this value has changed, then we go here. Okay, this part, ShowMoney. Here, we need to pass in the mounting. So let's just give it a mounting here. Actually, we can also distinguish between the client and the server here. So let's still make that distinction here. Distinguish between the client and the server. Then we'll copy one from the previous part. Like this, if we are the server side, then we'll use red. We give it a server mountain. And if we are not the server side, then it must be the client side. Because we haven't considered other cases here. We only talk about the S. LS, everyone, give it a try. Okay, so here, let's change this message. Here it becomes client mountain. Okay. Then when we receive a property change, it will modify this text. Now let's think about it. If we are on the client side, how do we modify this value? Then we definitely need to send an RPC to jump to the server to make the modification. So on our end, we rely on a server call here. I usually like to write it this way. In future lessons, I'll try to write it this way for you as much as possible. So here it should actually be called client cool server. Then update money. Alright, okay. So in this place, this is the money we want to add. Right, okay, so we need to create its implementation. And its implementation. Everyone remember to fill in this implementation. Let me check if I spelled implementation wrong. Because this word is a bit long. Indeed, I spelled it wrong. I saw at a glance that it was missing at. Okay, then here, this is where our client jumps to the server. We go to add this money. Oh, here we can simply just add it directly. We can use expose here. Then, because we are using C++ here, it may not execute this on the server, the onReplay function. So we need to manually show money. Then at this point, we execute this function. Let's execute this function now. Then we create a new map here. We name it IPC2. Let's create the RPC2. Map first. Okay. Give it a tube. Okay, let's open this map. Then we need to create a subclass of the blueprints we just wrote. Okay, we can just start with BP. Then we put it in this position. Put it in this position here, okay? After we put it in, we can just leave it alone. At this point, actually, to be honest, we still need to operate the same way as before. Because our DS server, at the beginning, it doesn't have a player controller. So this point is quite troublesome. So we can do it this way. We just drag one in like this. It must be a reliable and secret, such an object. Then we wait a moment. We wait 2 seconds. We wait for 2 seconds because we need to wait for the player to log in before we can perform this operation. Then we directly set over. Then we directly get our first player controller, because by this time the player has already entered. Okay, this way we can perform related operations. Of course, for this step, we must do it on the server. So here we need to make a judgment. We received a QQ message. Sorry, let's pay attention. We made a mistake here. Here we didn't pay attention when concatenating the subtitle string. We need to add a D here, then delete the previous parameter, because when we originally wrote it, we didn't check the details when pasting it over. So this needs to be changed, and this timing needs to be changed, because if you don't set the timing, it will only flash for 1 frame. A flash passes by in an instant, so we can't see it. So pay attention to this part. Then we can go ahead and start it out. Okay, this part here is because it was added later. So this part might be a bit different. But overall, it shouldn't be too different. And calling the blueprint here is also quite simple. Just call it like this, okay? Then let's continue looking further. Okay, now we can see, right, we can see this increase we made earlier is completely fine. This is our RPC combined with property synchronization. After we use the combination of techniques, we can operate like this. You see, the reason for the earlier error is that we haven't set the owner into it yet. This is very normal because we have a 2-second delay for play and the waiting time. Then next, we need to add a verification function. So how do we add this verification function? We add it like this. We need to add a metadata after this function. This method is with verification. Next, we need to create a primitive method. Note this, we don't need to create its function header. We can just modify it here. Here, its return value is a boolean and its suffix is. So, obviously, this code must be executed on this server. Then if we judge like this, if the money he wants to add is greater than 5, we think this might be incorrect. We just make it return a unfalse. We also manage this return. By default, we return true. Then, if it detects that this amount is greater than 5, we return a false. Then we try to compile it. See if it can compile successfully, because it seems to have some red lines here. Okay, this compilation can pass. Now this part will definitely be verified on the server. Let's test it now. Okay. Now, after we enter, how do we test it? We opened the wrong map again. Let's go back to this map. We are here. Let's press the 2 key. We press 2 to make it add 10. Then let's start and test it now. Let's first look at one client. Oh, now we press 1. Okay. You can. When we press 2, you see. Let's test it again. What if there's no problem? Let's go with option 2. It basically has an error. Let's see what the error is. This place seems to be prompting us about this. This thing seems to have lost it. Seems like a network error. Your connection to the host has been lost. Yes. Please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, share, and donate to support the Mingjing and Diandian program.